Hi, everybody. This is David Sable, once again coming to you, with you, at you, for New York Festival's Creativity from the Other Side, bringing you a view of what's happening with the most incredible creative people that I know. Most of my friends, they're all FOD, friends of David, so maybe that's not fair, but it makes it a lot more interesting for me. And I'm back with Duncan Bird, who is not just a good friend, but he's a constant inspiration. Duncan is the Vice President of Brand Marketing and Digital for Fiverr. And let me tell you, you got to be on Mars, or actually beyond Mars, if you're out of the universe, if you haven't been following Fiverr's huge and incredible success over the past few months. I'd like to say that a big part of it came after the brilliant rebrand that Duncan led, and I think actually it's partially true. But the success of this brand is beyond. It is currently trading higher than any of the holding companies, any of the big holding companies, or any of the pretend holding companies, or just about anybody else in the industry. So what do you say about that, Duncan?
You do the kindest introductions, as always. You should be my agent, my rep or something.
We'll talk about that after. Talk to us just about the success, and then we'll get into some other stuff. Just because
we have witnessed some phenomenal growth. We're very, very proud of it, and I think, as we touched on last time, that what's been happening in the world with the whole working from home is moving towards the future of work and the positioning of our brand and our company. And there's an extreme kind of momentum and movement moving in our direction, and the way in which our company has presented itself. You talked about our rebrand, and yeah, we've seen some phenomenal results. It's a lot more than just the part of the job that I do for our company, as a huge company with a lot of incredibly talented people. But I'll take that compliment that you gave me.
No, because I loved the rebrand, and I think it was timely and brilliant. But let's just talk for a second though about work from home, because the truth is work from home fits the supply side, right? So it just maybe gives you more people to be on the platform. But the fact is that work from home cannot be just the reason that more people are coming from the demand side to use the platform. No, I think there's been just a fundamental shift.
There is a fundamental shift. There was a fundamental shift. There continues to be a fundamental shift in the way that people want to go about getting the tasks that they need done. And our platform allows people to get things done in a quicker, more efficient, and a better way, which is befitting with a lot of the challenges that the creative industry has been facing, that people want the best talent and they want it at the right price, and they want the result to be delivered to them quickly, and they want choice in the types of people at different price points and for different services. And yeah, we're seeing growth on both the buyer side and the supply side, and it's not surprising to us. But it's great to see it. And I think that what's been happening in the world with the lack of being able to travel and being able to collaborate in the ways that people normally would, people have had to get creative and to think differently. And there's a stickiness around when you experience the way that you can get things done on Fiverr. We see people coming back. It's not just people coming and trying it once. It's people starting to change their habits of how they see the ways in which they can get things done to a phenomenal standard, and really easily and really quickly with great choice.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, and those of you who are listening who have never tried Fiverr, I really recommend it. It's worth a try just for your own work. You know, as many of you know, and Duncan, I think you know, I do a lot of presentations, and I'm always creating PowerPoints and whatever, and I've always worked with studios, and so I decided to give Fiverr a try. And you know, it's hit or miss in the beginning. You have to learn. Learning the platform is as important as using the platform. Meaning that you have to learn the language. You have to really understand what you're asking for. But what I find fascinating is I've done business now with a few really incredible people. One woman now, she's going to be my PowerPoint person. She's in India and totally gets it. And we're not talking here FTEs and hourly. It's, I give her the brief, I give her the work, I tell her kind of what I'm interested in. Woman asked me incredible questions just to make it easier. We went back and forth. There was a piece I liked, pieces I didn't like, and she delivered me a fabulous presentation.
Yeah, you know, what we're seeing is that over and over again. I mean, just from a personal point of view, my fiance's launched her own business in the last few months and did it entirely on Fiverr. She runs a salon now, and all of her e-commerce, her back end, her website, her booking system, all done on Fiverr, and phenomenal. And then the trickle-on effect of that is other people saying, wow, where did you get that done? I got it done on Fiverr. And we're seeing that, you know, the scale and the size of businesses that are collaborating on our platform now with Fiverr Business, and the ability to be able to have really carefully selected services for you and allowing teams to collaborate has been really, really incredible.
Yeah, no, I agree. So let's just follow this down, just talk about advertising a little bit. But I read an incredible statistic today, but it was incredible not just because of the immense number, but because I tried to think about it and like as if it made a difference to me. And so I'm going to tell you what it is. So Work Research says that $63 billion in advertising went away during the pandemic.
Well, there are a lot of damn lies in statistics.
Well, so, okay, so 61 billion, like, but they said 63, which is okay.
Great.
All I can tell you is
54.2% of all statistics are made up.
Well, hopefully they didn't make this one up, because otherwise it kills my point. But so there you go. But here's my question though. So 63 billion, even if it's 50 billion, I don't care. I didn't notice that there was a distinct drop in advertising, and I don't think anybody did.
No, I think.
What does that mean?
I think what that figure is talking to is media inflation works by the fact that there's an inequilibrium between somebody wanting to buy media and somebody wanting to sell media.
Sell it.
And what we're seeing is, if you think about, you're running an out-of-home company right now, you're not going to be able to charge the same rates as you did pre-pandemic until you can prove that there are the eyeballs there. So, for example, some of the mega out-of-home boards that are available around the world are now unsurprisingly available at knockdown prices. And you see on the billboards, as I walked through Soho today, some very strange advertisers advertising on billboards who you wouldn't necessarily expect. Similarly on TV, people pull their budgets, but it's not that those advertisements go away. It's that they're being replaced by other advertisers who maybe wouldn't have been there previously. And, you know, I speak from firsthand knowledge of friends in the industry who run some of these companies who, you know, they've had to really rescale and rethink their businesses in the short to medium term.
No, I agree. And so that was where that's what I was hoping you were going to say, that there's been a replacement. It's also interesting, though, to see in the replacement, the kinds of companies. I mean, I saw a ad for a online casino on a news broadcast program early in the morning the other day, which kind of shocked me in a sense, just because usually you see either more high-end direct, or you see very corporate kinds of ads. You see a lot of Amazon, a lot of Facebook, you know, whatever at that time of the morning. So I think you're right. I think there's been a lot of replacement. But then that brings me to, like, what's happening with advertising? How relevant are we really being? I had this discussion with Rob Riley the other day. And it was interesting. Rob had some really good points that, you know, he feels, and I agree with him in part, that many advertisers did stand up and stood up and did really good work, really important work. I think to me, relevancy was adding value as opposed to necessarily telling me how bad it is, but maybe telling me how to use their product better, or giving me information that I wasn't getting someplace else, not necessarily about the pandemic, just about things that I could do that were relevant to them. Because again, I wonder sometimes, the pizza company telling you to put a mask on is nice, but I have the ad council doing that as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
I think the longer we've been in this, the appropriateness of messaging changes. So yeah, at the beginning it was all about, wearing a mask and so on, and that shouldn't really be the job of a pizza company. And I think a bit like Lord Lever of Unilever said, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. I just don't know which half. My observation is that roughly half the advertisers have got their shit together and are doing relevant stuff, and the other half are going, wow, it's cheap, let's dive in. I mean, I saw an ad for a cruise company the other day, and I don't want to knock cruise companies because they've got to try and stay in business, but it just seemed odd seeing a TV ad for a cruise company where my perception from the news is that it's probably one of the worst places you could be for your safety. And yet here they are telling me it's one of the best places I could be to go on an enclosed vessel with lots of other people, get away from it all. And I was just kind of scratching my head going, but you haven't told me why. You've just told me cruises exist. I mean, it's mad. And I was really shocked when I saw it. But, and there are other advertisers who've adjusted their messaging and are doing a great job. I mean, some of the holiday / Christmas, depending on where you are in the world, ads that are coming out definitely fall into those two camps. People who have adjusted, or people who are saying, please come and visit my shop, store, brand, and spend more, which is potentially a little insensitive, versus we understand how you're feeling and let's try and be a little supportive and give a bit more hope rather than please.
Yes. So I shared an article with you earlier in the week that I read in the Times. So they said that they put it into basically 3 stages since this began, right? The first stage was advertisers saying, yeah, we understand. We got it. There's a pandemic. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. And if you remember, there was that famous takedown of some, I don't want to say all, because that's not fair. It's an exaggeration, but of many of the ads of that first couple of months where everybody's using the same footage and they use the same music and they all had the same line, we're in it together. And as again, as Rob pointed out, also accurately, it was a time was hard. Nobody could go out and shoot. So everybody was buying footage. And so the possibility of you're buying the same footage is higher. All right. But that was phase 1. Hey, we got it. Phase 2, according to this article, is pretending nothing happened. So that was probably more over the summer. And I guess there were some people like that. And now we're in phase 3, which is acceptance, as they say, of the new normal, limitations with some hope. So first of all, I'm against the new normal because I don't think there is a new normal. I don't think we know what new normal is yet. It's changing every day. In the UK, as they started giving vaccines here. Pfizer doesn't think they're going to be able to make enough until...
They did. And the second person who got vaccinated today in the UK's name was William Shakespeare from Stratford-upon-Avon. Can you believe it? 90 years old. And the doctor said, this is a much ado about nothing.
There you go.
True story.
I love it. And sadly, though, if you saw the news, the recent news, 2 people have died who got the vaccine. So I think that's going to be an issue going forward. But my point being not that it's good or bad because it's important, but it's going to be a long time before we have the vaccine here. So there is no new normal. But what do you think about those 3 things? Hey, we got it, pretending nothing happened, and now sort of acceptance of, call it whatever, forget new normal, acceptance of we're in a time of transition, but we have to show hope.
I think it really...
What should brands be thinking?
I think it really depends on the nature of the brand you're representing. So if we stick with that cruise company for a minute, let's say you and I are running the cruise company I mean, is it sensible to be encouraging people to be getting on a cruise right now? I would argue it isn't. Maybe post-vaccine it is. Are there other things that they could do or ways in which they could promote it? I don't know. If you are part of, I guess, what we call kind of the essentials, be that kind of supermarkets and grocery stores, then yeah, you should be talking to your customers and explaining to them what you're doing to make it easier, safer, better value. You know, people are really suffering in this pandemic. I think it's very dependent upon the category that you find yourself promoting your brand. And I think, you know, reading that article and reading some of the comments in it, you know, some people quite rightly are frustrated with advertisers who are kind of pretending and continuing as if nothing has changed and encouraging them to buy, you know, high ticket items or to, for example, go on a holiday.
Right. I think also though, which I agree with, but I think there's also a bit of frustration about yet another ad with a note taped to the window. So, you know, again, I mean, I think that, and maybe it's because maybe just because that's the shorthand. Maybe it just works. I don't know.
But then for everyone who's sick of that, you know, I saw in the comments in the article, people saying I teared up and I loved it. But you know, at the end of the day, it was for a supermarket. And now the supermarket ad that I love, the one from the UK for Co-op, was two young brothers who are actual brothers in real life who went and bussed outside a Co-op and they're playing their guitar and they're playing an Oasis song. And you think, because the way the ad's set up, that it's about austerity. But what they were really doing was cheering everyone else up. It was about community. And the brand is the cooperative, yeah. which is, you know, based on a Northern England ethic of community work and supporting each other, not unlike our brand. And I love the fact that at the end, when the guy goes to offer the kid the money, and the kid's what, like 7, 8 years old, he's like, no, I'm just doing it to make you happy. And that's a great way to communicate. And they're not saying come to Co-op and buy baked beans 50 pence off. They're saying we understand, and we want people to feel happier and giving that positive hope. I don't know how you would do that if you're a cruise company.
Right, but I love how they're doing it though, because they're doing it by living it as opposed to showing it.
Yeah, and the fact that they chose some young kids from the north of England who have a believable way, and they're not like buffed up,
right,
like ad children straight out of drama school. You know, they're great. You know, the little kid with his teeth missing, and the bigger brother didn't want him to come. I mean, I love that stuff, and I think everyone involved in it and the brand should be really, really proud of that. And that hopefulness, which can come through, I think, one direction is celebrating or recognizing the struggles of communities, and the other, I think, which is very much the British approach, is the use of humor to get through things. And I think those ones where they're a little bit serious, some of the ones like the Gucci one, I mean, it was kind of trying to be funny, but you could see they hadn't got actors. It was just models. It was just all a bit, yeah, you're trying to sell us shirts that cost $800 in a pandemic. Come on. Should you be on TV? And now they're on TV because I'm sure it's more affordable for them than it would be normally.
Right. No, I hear you. So let's talk a little about the workplace change and what's going on. You're in your office right now.
I am indeed.
You're the only person there.
We had some people here earlier. I am on my own right now, and I come whenever I can, which is not all of the time. It depends on, you know, what time my day starts. Sometimes my day starts incredibly early, so it's hard to get into the office in time. But yeah, I enjoy it. But you know, we're not encouraging or forcing or asking people to come in the office. I just like having that break between being at home and having a work environment. And my partner comes into the city, so it makes sense for me.
And what do you think is going to happen? Are people going to come back? Do they want to come back? Are they missing in your particular?
Yeah, I think
people missing that serendipity of
I think everybody's missing it in different ways. And I think about the coming back part, it will very much depend on the results of the vaccine and how safe people feel. I mean, I heard one of the people in the UK today who was vaccinated saying she was looking forward to being able to go to the shops and hopefully get back on public transport. And, you know, lovely hearing someone saying that. I think for the people who work in our company, the idea of being able to sit at this table that I'm sat at, where we often eat together and drink together, and a lot of the kind of the stuff around the edges of work gets talked about, I think will be good. But I think there are two groups of people generally from everyone I speak to. People who are extremely cautious, who don't want to come back until everything's safe, and those people who are more enthusiastic about getting into the office. And what we can't do and shouldn't do is try and force people to move from one group to the other. We should take our time. And I think probably what it's going to teach a lot of companies and brands is the idea of working from home is not necessarily substandard. It's just different. And I think a blend of being in the office and working from home might become more the new normal. But who knows? I mean, if you'd have told me we would be still in this situation when we met in the summer, I would have said, "Oh, come on, we're gonna have this sorted out." But here we are, which is why we get these phrases like the new normal, because unfortunately, it is normal that we don't meet people other than like this.
Right. So let's just talk though, let's push this down a little bit, because I also agree with you, because I think there will be some hybrid coming out of this. But what I'm always interested in, and what I keep asking people, is what is it that they feel in their industry or in their company that's missing? In other words, I get like this working at home works, it's good. I, like you, I go into the office almost every day, and I sit there most days, mostly by myself, because I need the change after 8-9 months of sitting home.
Yeah.
And also my wife threw me out. Like, she said, enough already. Like, you got to get out of here. But the truth is that I wonder, so I'll give you an example. Our industry is a little bit different, because it's not like we hire people as we need them. But when you look at the consulting companies or law firms, they have big groups who come in every year, right? So they have classes that come in of associates. And as I speak to my friends in those businesses, they're feeling a tremendous loss right now, because they have young people who've come in out of law school who think that this is all there is. Like, it's working for them. Why would they ever come into an office? Yeah. And so the culture of the company, the culture of David and Duncan just sitting around, meeting in the hallway, and David asking, "What are you working on?" "Oh, I got this case, and it's kind of interesting." It's done. It's gone.
I mean, if you and I had never met in person, this conversation would be different to how we're able to have it not in person. And I think that therein lies the challenge. So when you're new to a company, so people we've hired, or your company's hired, or any company has hired, who've not met in person, you can't experience the same understanding of culture. If I think back to some of the places I've worked in the past when I was back in the UK, the culture was so dependent upon being there, but that was pre the invention of broadband. And to do a meeting like this, you had to go to one of those special places, and you rented a place, and you went and spoke to the Levi's client in San Francisco, so you didn't have to fly all the way there. It was never the same. You could do it if you had a great relationship and you were going to San Francisco every now and again. And this is one of the challenges I think that all businesses are facing now. If you're a growing business, that you're expanding your workforce, and your workforce needs to understand what you culturally stand for and what are the things that you expect. And you can do it to a certain extent on Zoom. I mean, I had a day on Zoom recently where I started at like 6 a.m. and I didn't surface until 6 p.m. And to be honest with you, there were a lot of those Zoom meetings where I'm not sure my brain was functioning at the same level it would have done if I'd have been in actual meeting rooms. But what can you do?
So what would you recommend to a young person who's been hired recently, never worked before, or maybe had another job and now comes into a new company where there is a new culture. They haven't had the opportunity to be face to face. What would you recommend to them? How can they try to assimilate some of it?
I'd recommend they talk to Colette on my team, because she's done exactly that, and she seems to get our culture fantastic. I think it's a really tough thing to offer advice. I think trying to spend time talking to people on Zoom outside of meetings, so you get to know people, or on Slack or on other forms of communication. I was chatting with one of the people on our team today about music on Slack. It had nothing to do with work, and I felt much more connected to her. It'd be this sort of conversation I would have had with her in the office. I think trying to push yourself to have those conversations, and I think it sounds like in your question you're talking about younger people out of college. I would encourage them to think about the ways in which the gaming industry changed the nature of gaming once you could connect and play with people you weren't physically with. And what you see with young people is it's not just the game that's making them want to play the game. It's the conversation on the side of the game with other people about what they're doing in the game and things that are going on in different parts of the world. And that's that side communication, which is separate to the actual Fortnite or F1 or whatever it is you're playing.
But I love what you said, and I call this out to everybody who's listening. This notion of don't just sometimes go beyond whatever it is that you're there to discuss, or just jump in and be serendipitous like you would if you were regular, and just ask a question, ask about music, a book.
Yeah, and then I think
something they've read, or what are they watching?
It's that stuff that years ago came out of I remember when I started my career, I would spend time hanging out with people in the agency who I didn't really get exposed to, and it would typically be at places like a pub, a bar, a restaurant, whatever. And you would hear these conversations about interesting things that were happening that you had nothing to do with, but you were absorbing it. And I think that in a world where it's Zoom, you can probably still do that, or you can try to do that by sparking conversations that aren't just about the 4 bullet point agenda that the meeting's about. So can I catch up with you about that afterwards? I'd love to find out more about that. That's
right.
Interesting.
So one of the things that I found is that I've tried to mix it up. So I call people, like, guess what? Like old-fashioned cell phone. And I find sometimes that kind of a call is more intimate, because it is, because you're holding it, you're talking, it's different. It's easier to get into certain questions because I don't see you. I find that
interesting, isn't it, though, that if you were interviewing someone, you wouldn't do it over the telephone, you definitely do it over Zoom. And I think that intimacy comes from knowing the person. So you're right, I talk to quite a few people on my team on the phone because I don't want Zoom fatigue for them or for me, and we know what each other look like. But if you don't have some intimacy already, the telephone doesn't get you necessarily to the place where you want to be, because
right. Totally true.
It's like the difference between radio advertising versus TV.
Right. I also find FaceTime is interesting when it's one-on-one. Like sometimes, you know what, you don't need to Zoom me. We don't need to have an invitation. How about we just FaceTime?
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a great, what's that? No, I'm reading Jerry Seinfeld's book, Is This a Thing? Which I thoroughly recommend to everyone. It's every joke he's ever written. And his publisher just said, why don't we just do this in lockdown? So I got the Audible version, which is him reading it. And it is not only hilarious, but there's a whole piece in it where he talks about text. Where did text come from? He's like, was there an ad for text? Did somebody come on TV and say, hey, for when you don't want to make a phone call and you just want to get an answer to something? And it's really great how he breaks down communication. And if you think about text or messaging on an app, it's the equivalent of not making a phone call. And then when you do text someone and they call, you're like, oh my God, I didn't want to call, I was texting. So I think there are so many different layers with which you can use technology to be more intimate or less intimate. But, at the end of the day, as I said, if you and I hadn't met, our ability to be able to communicate with each other would be slightly different. We would be more hesitant, more...
Right, I agree.
Lean back and like, what's going on? What does he want?
I agree. And I think that's what we're going to miss. So I hope that as the vaccine takes and as we get more free, that hopefully that comes back. And in our hybrid world, that there will be more intimacy, more face-to-face, more,
I don't think
more people come
anybody,
together.
I don't think anybody really wants to be living like this in entirety forever. I rewatched the movie Wall-E the other night, and it's charming and wonderful and a great use of 2 hours of your time. It's Pixar. I mean, what's not to love about it? I didn't realize Sigourney Weaver is the voice of the ship's computer. But what is the slightly depressing part is because they've been 700 years floating around Earth waiting to see if trees grow again. They've then just become really lazy and bored and odd. And, you know, I'd hate for us to lose that human intimacy.
No, I agree. So let's move on and talk about a couple other things. It did. So when streaming and Netflix started to take hold, and Netflix put everything out for binge watching, and of course everybody said, no, everything's binge watching. It's the only way you'll ever watch. And of course HBO and others said, nah, screw that. We're still gonna put it out on Thursday night at 8:00 or whatever. It doesn't make a difference. You can watch it after that as much as you want, but and that worked too. And so there was no one way. So now we have Warner Brothers, who is holding some of their big releases, most importantly, the Wonder Woman, and they're going to release it in theaters. So the 3 theaters are still open someplace. I'm not quite sure where, probably North Dakota. And the rest are going to put out in streaming. And so there's been a big debate, which has fascinated me, because we went through this with the record industry. You'd think like people would just remember that we just went through this same discussion and ended up actually in an interesting place where there are still artists who release on vinyl. Some artists release one song at a time. Some artists release entire albums at a time. Some are working with labels, some are not. I mean, I just find the beauty of it is that nothing that any of the analysts said actually happened. It sort of became this hybrid of whatever worked, whatever the artist wanted, whatever worked the best, whatever they felt at that time is what they did. And yet, so now we're in this thing, and theaters are dead, that's it. It's all going to be streaming. And I don't know if you saw today, but there was a big controversy, which I think is a huge mistake, where, you know, what was Gal Gadot and the other actors going to get, and the director going to get paid? And their lawyers were arguing that they contracted under the assumption that it was going to be theaters, ergo they should get paid the same. So then maybe that works once, but it's not going to work a second time. So anyways, I'm just curious your view on this, and where's it going to go?
It's a weird situation, but I get why these companies are having to make these decisions. I was just listening the other day to a podcast with Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify, on the Tim Ferriss show, which I thoroughly recommend to anyone watching this. It's phenomenal. I had the pleasure of meeting him in his early 20s when I was at Sony Music, and he came and presented this thing. I don't know if it was even called Spotify then, and I thought it was fascinating. My colleagues thought it was a waste of time, and history has shown it was fascinating. And I think that oftentimes what happens is when big companies try and make big decisions like this, they often kind of get it wrong. Reading between the lines on the HBO Warner's thing, it seems to me like they made if you think back to the Queen's Gambit, the chess move, they made an odd move when they launched HBO Max, in that 26 million people who have it for free haven't got it. So 26 million people out there could have HBO Max and haven't bothered to activate it. That's a much bigger problem than the problem they're trying to fix. So it seems to me that they've like moved their pawn, exposed their bishop, and they're worried about a knight. It just seems so strange. I remember a guy at Sony saying during the digital revolution that he was thinking of getting an iPod, and I said to him, "Isn't that a bit like saying you're a butcher and you're thinking of getting into meat? It's a bit late." I don't know. I don't know that the release in lockdown of movies on HBO Max is a bad thing. will it really drive their numbers? You'll have to have a hell of a blockbuster to really see those numbers go up. And we all know that blockbusters right now in lockdown come out of nowhere. I mean, the Queen's Gambit being a great example of it, and that 5th season of The Crown. If one more person asks me about it, I'm going to scream. Please don't.
I wasn't going to, but did you like the Queen's Gambit?
The Queen's Gambit, I did. I thought she was very strangely cast because, as I understand it, the book, which came out 36 years ago, it was all about her being a very awkward person, both in her personality and her looks and everything, and how chess helped her overcome a whole load of things. But being television, they couldn't possibly deal with anything that anyone might not look perfect. So they got someone who'd previously been a model. So I didn't know that fact when I watched it, so it didn't bother me. But yeah, I'm a big chess fan and a big chess player, so I loved it.
I thought it was interesting. I actually found it. We watched it. We just finished watching it the other night. I found it to be actually interesting enough. I found it a little. At first, I said, "Oh my God!" Like, I can't believe it. Obviously, all the friends helped her at the end, and the thing. But sorry, I don't mean to give anything away if people haven't watched it. But on the other hand, it was right for the time.
Yeah,
I thought that the message was really. It left me feeling good.
I think that what's happened with streaming services in lockdown, and this is just going to sound like a truism, but Netflix, I think today posted on their own Instagram little screen grabs of each month, like an advent calendar. And you can look at it and Jan, Feb, and most people, March probably wouldn't remember them. But then past that, you go, oh yeah, I watched that. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And like we're all kind of leading our lives sequentially through the likes of Netflix, because what the hell else are you going to do?
Right, that's true. I think the problem is though, because they put everything out on binge.
Yeah.
So it's a little harder versus like if you're looking at Prime or if you're on HBO or Disney, where they do it on they still do it on a 2 or a 1. I mean, I guess it depends on.
Yeah, I watched the Nicole Kidman, Hugh Grant thing, which obviously was a bit of a thriller. No, I don't want to spoil that for anyone, but that had already been released because by the time it hit my ears or eyes, and yeah, we just binged the hell out of it because that's just what you do now. It's like, oh,
right. I love the anticipation. So I've been watching The Mandalorian, and I love that every Thursday night. So I watch it Saturday night. And so I love it. I love to know that it's okay. Saturday night, I'm going to watch another Mandalorian that came out on Thursday night, which
what we discovered is you're a lot more patient than me, David. I'm just like, if it's there.
I love the anticipation. I'm all about anticipation. I love.
But going back to your original question, though, I think we talked in the last conversation we had about the movie The Irishman, and I remember this whole debate came up with Netflix that they originally had said it was a theatrical release, and they decided to do it jointly, and it was the same thing with the lawyers. And I think it's a really tough call. I mean, what's going to happen? Are we going to want to go back into movie theaters for that experience? Pre-lockdown, we saw there was a huge increase in whatever they call them, like the luxury cinema with the bigger seats and the cocktail.
Right, like an iPick or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and that's been a growing industry. I don't know. I wouldn't put my money on it right now. I'm personally not that keen on putting myself in a place for 3 hours with other people who I don't know what their medical situation is. If I don't have to, and if I don't have to, why would I? But then I look across the pond in England, and the minute that the Premier League was allowed to have fans back in, they packed them in, and instead of putting them around the stadium, they packed them all in together. And I love football, but I'm not sure I'd want to risk my life for it.
Right. Maybe because you've been living here. I don't know. I mean, I think you're totally right. But look at all the people who go to the Trump rallies, right? So I think who knows? Well, I guess we'll see when I think we're going to end up, as you say, in each of these categories we're talking about, there's going to be a hybrid of something, because something will change in the long run. And I guess we have yet to see what it's going to be. What else are you seeing out there?
What else am I seeing out there? I'm seeing a lack of people on the streets, which I think doesn't bode well for anyone in the advertising industry who wants eyeballs. The flip side of that is I'm seeing a lot less traffic. So it means I can move around New York City in a car at speeds which I didn't think were possible. You know as well as I do that to get from one part of Manhattan to another, it's 45 minutes plus. Now it's 10 minutes. So I'm definitely seeing that. And I'm seeing a frustration, I think, particularly around people who I have socialized with and communicate with around the lack of cultural exchange, by which I mean, you know, live music, art, and that side of things. The more the stuff that we all use to fuel our curiosity and imagination. I think there's a growing sense of frustration around that, and I keep seeing really interesting ideas that people are trying to come up with to help people in those industries. I saw some musicians in Scotland recently got together to record a bunch of covers to support the roadies. So the roadies make their money obviously out of live music, and they're not getting any money in this period. So a lot of them are quite good musicians themselves. So they had these famous artists got the roadies to play on a bunch of tracks where the money went to them, which I thought was really smart and really lovely. I'm seeing museums trying to open up in certain ways. I do miss going to both museums, both museums and art galleries. And I personally find it very frustrating, but if you try hard, you can see a lot of it online. I mean, I watched My Morning Jacket last night at Red Rocks. It's great. It was filmed perfectly. I wasn't there, but it was the next best thing. Sorry, my computer won't
So
stop.
it's interesting you say that. I was just thinking as you were talking. I mean, I personally, and I miss the live music. I miss the museums. I do, and I miss Broadway terribly. I miss plays. And on the other hand, I now literally every single night of the week, just about, I take another class. I listen to a lecture.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not talking about master classes. I mean, I'm talking about serious, interesting lectures on art and religion.
I've been taking lectures on classical music. I'm on about my 20th lecture now, and like really deep drilling into understanding, which I had almost just a surface knowledge of classical music. And I'm finding it fascinating.
And doesn't that make you feel good? I don't know. It makes me feel good.
It makes me feel good. I think there's a danger it can make one a little smug if you're not careful. That, you know, saying to friends going, "Oh, you didn't know the difference between this and that."
Yeah, all right. I'm being careful about that, but I just find personally, I'm doing one on comparative religion, and another one on great artists, you know, on the great masters, mostly on Rembrandt, and it's just each night I look forward to it because I learn something new, and it's interesting. The other thing is, to your other point, I was on the phone earlier with some people who run a film festival. It's been okay, you know, fairly successful over the years. They've done it all online. They literally had 10 times the number of people come online, and they actually even made more money.
Well, we do,
which I think is amazing.
We do a lot of community events at Fiverr, and what we've noticed is where we've done conferences, and we've done quite a few now, the level of people participating is way, way higher because people want to learn, they want to get an exchange of views, and they want to meet and network. And you can do all of that online, and to some extent, you can do it better online as long as you're willing to actually invest in it and turn up and talk to people. What maybe one time you had to physically be in New York, or you had to be in Mexico City or Paris or wherever, you can join in.
So one last question before we wrap up, and hopefully everybody's paying attention to why I'm asking this question, because it comes back to your advice to everybody. On the other hand, I would be remiss talking to you if I didn't ask you about music, because you are so knowledgeable and a great musician yourself.
I think I know where this is going.
What are you listening to? I was going to ask you to sing Dylan, but I'm not going to do that. So what are you listening to? What should we be listening to? What's new? What's different? Or what's old that you've rediscovered?
Michael Kiwanuka's third album, which is called Kiwanuka. He's a Nigerian Londoner, He just won the Mercury Music Award for his third album called Kiwanaku. Even the cover art is fantastic.
Do you want to spell it for everybody just so they...
Kiwanku. Google will correct it if I got it wrong. Don't worry. It's like a mixture between Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On" and Primal Scream's "Screamadelica" and everything in between. It is the most beautiful record. I've listened to that a lot. I've been listening to some new classical releases from the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. They just have a new conductor, and they are releasing a series of new recordings. They've done some with Tchaikovsky and some with some other composers I'd never heard of. I'm really enjoying that. And then I'm listening to the Blue Note Tone Poet series, which is Don Was, who runs Blue Note Records now, has got in the guy behind Music for Vinyl, who is supposed to be one of the great engineers in mastering vinyl. And according to aficionados, which I wouldn't claim to be one, the sound quality on these vinyl records is as good as the original pressings, which, if you know anything about Blue Note Jazz, would set you back anything from $300, $400, $500, $600. These are all $20, $25. You can get them at Amazon or your local record store. It's called the Tone Poets series, and it is phenomenal. But if you're into it, it is rather addictive.
On behalf of New York Festivals, this is David Sable with Creativity from the Other Side. Just finished a wonderful and interesting and fun conversation with my good friend Duncan Bird, Vice President of Brand Marketing and Digital at Fiverr. As I said at the beginning, do look at Fiverr, read about them as a company, and just look at their huge success over the past few months, because I think it's not just astounding, it's important. It's important to understand, because I think there definitely is a nexus here of just activity and things that are happening that are important for our industry and for the market. And with that,
thank you, David. As we say in our brand messaging, Fiverr, it starts here.
It starts here, and it always starts here with you. So I thank you again, and everyone else. I'll see you at the next interview. Be well,
David.